This is Power Athlete Radio. With your hosts, Denny K, Professor Booty, and the Luke Summers. And now, toes forward, hips locked, shoulders set, and retract those scapulars. It's time for some knowledge bombs.
Thanks for tuning into Power Athlete Radio. This week, we welcome former world-class thrower, author, coach, and power athlete Dan John. This episode is packed with words of wisdom from this part-time religious studies teacher, part-time coach, and full-time badass. We start by talking about how track and field has changed over the years and why genetics and geography play the biggest role in succeeding in sports. Dan also talks about why coaching and obtaining experience is, quote, like a bow and arrow. You can pull back, but eventually you have to let it go. Hear why he prefers to assess athletes using the farmer carry and why he feels the broad jump is a better test of power displacement as compared to the vertical jump. Also, which of his mediocre athletes are in danger of hearing those gut-wrenching words, maybe God doesn't want you to lift weights? What are Dan's thoughts about writing for the controversial and highly hormonal training resource Testosterone Nation? To find out, you'll have to listen to an even more controversial resource. If Power Athlete Radio were an exercise, it'd be a high-rep skull crusher. Here is episode 96 with Dan John.
What's up, Power Athlete Nation? Welcome to another episode of Power Athlete Radio. This is Denny. I'm here with Tex, Luke, John, and Callie. And today we're joined by special guest, Mr. Dan John. How's everybody doing?
Good. Yo.
Excellent.
Great. I'm Luke Summers.
And
we're all great.
You are Luke Summers.
I'm really doing it.
Yeah, we're all reeling from a great weekend. We all had great weekends. Luke he was, I assume, spending the entire weekend practicing for his softball games that he's now playing softball. So,
I was shredding the pow-pows snowboarding.
Shredding the gnar.
See, you know what? The fact that you guys get to go snowboarding and take trips, I was home with my kids.
You spent 10 years in the NFL. You've had your fun.
Yeah,
you need to be a dad now.
You know, what did we do? We had a busy day at the farmer's market, and then we went for a bike ride to the
Home
park,
Depot.
Bed Bath & Beyond.
Sushi, and then we went for froyo.
Oh, it sounds like your life was terrible this weekend.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't like I got to go, snowboarding or go visit a collection of really cool Star Wars costumes.
Dan, do you happen to be a Star Wars fan by chance?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, great.
Well, I saw the original in a drive-in, so you guys could do your best to trump me, but
yeah,
Star Wars fan before I think most of you strode this planet.
Yeah, that's, for the listeners who didn't get to hear us before the show, you did warn us because we were joking and somehow I made a reference to Gandhi, and John said he had never met Gandhi, but then you chimed in very humbly, I might say, later, in fact, almost as like an afterthought, that you had actually, or was it the Dalai Lama? Dalai Lama. Yeah, and you said that, that you had indeed met him and that we could expect more one-upping to occur.
Well, I did meet George W. Bush. Which
is
the same as the Dalai Lama.
Right. Still trying to get showered off from that experience.
Yeah, and I met Hillary Clinton too. I had dinner with her.
Oh, good for you.
So yeah, I'm yeah.
Yeah, well, I got the opportunity to go see some Star Wars costumes from the original movies in Seattle over the weekend. They had a big costume exhibit, so for what it's worth, I wasn't there in the theater when they originally came out, but I came in close contact to something that Harrison Ford was wearing on his skin, so feel pretty good about that.
I did get a chance to see all the Star Wars films in the theater.
Did you?
I did.
The first one came out, what, in 77?
Yeah.
77? First movie I
my
remember
uncle
seeing.
was a big, huge nerd, so he brought me to that. I would have been like 5-ish, and I can remember going to see that film, man.
Dude, I remember seeing the first movie I saw was E.T., and we saw it at a drive-in in my parents' like '76 Volkswagen bus. And my dad made popcorn and put it in the bathroom, made a big brown bag, and we sat back with sleeping bags and watched it. That was my first memory of a movie. So.
Dan, where did you grow up?
South San Francisco.
Okay, so you're Californian as well.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to college?
Pardon me?
Did you go to San Francisco State?
No, Utah State.
Oh, Utah State. That's right.
Yeah, I grew up in South City, and it's a great place. But I always wanted to. It's a great place, but I wanted to track out on my own. I'm the youngest of 6, so no matter what I've had done in my life, somebody else had done it before. So let's roll the dice and see what happens. Yeah.
That's great.
And then you threw the shot and did discus at Utah?
Yeah, I was a discus thrower. Utah State, and it still is. It's a phenomenal discus throwing school. When I got there, the world record holder was an Aggie. Canadian record holder was an Aggie. National champs, and just a real great tradition of throwers. Yeah.
Did you get a chance to go on and I'm sure you trained for the Olympics, but Olympic trials, anything?
Oh, sure. I just wasn't good enough, but thanks for reminding me.
No, hey, I'm always.
Yeah, I forgot the screaming and crying. I'd almost. My therapist says that.
It's funny with the Olympic stuff. I mean, I always thought, like, having played in the NFL, people ask me always, like, do you think it's a great accomplishment? And I always remember thinking, like, yeah, it's a great accomplishment, but I don't know if anything would ever outweigh being able to get to the Olympics or really have that opportunity. I mean, it's pretty much you train your entire life for one moment, and to me, that is like, I think that's why people are so gripping. In the NFL, you get 17 chances. In baseball, you get like about 1 billion a season. But the Olympics, once every 4 years, it's pretty solid. How were you how are you ranked? I mean, just kind of going into the whole.
Oh, I've been ranked throughout the years. I've tops. I made 16 a couple times, which was great. As an American, I've worn USA on my chest. We're just such a good. When I came up, we were just so good. I mean, I tell these young kids I work with now. I mean, I threw 180 and 190 and didn't make the final. And I'm not talking about the nationals. I'm talking about a normal. It was just so good at the time. In the 70s, one time at a meet, Tim Vollmer threw 221 and didn't make the finals. So he didn't make the top 8. 221. Well, I mean, that would be the best throw in the world for like the last, It was just a different world back then.
Wow. What do you think has changed?
Well, I think dog tracks in the snow would be number one. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. At least where we are. I mean, say the anabolic steroids aren't being used, it would be juvenile. But and it's obvious. I mean, when someone goes to another country to get special training, they come back and they say, "Oh, well, now I'm throwing the shot or disc with, come on, you had 30 feet, come on." But the other thing is track and field is taking a big hit in the United States. Mommy and daddy can sign big checks to get you on an elite club volleyball team, an elite club basketball team, an elite club. But in track and field, man, there's no check. You show up. There's no I can coach you in the discus and improve you, but we're not going to overcome your genetics. We're not going to overcome your lack of self-discipline. We're not going to overcome your inability to stand tall in the face of pressure. It's in the current generation. I mean, God, I sound like an old fart right now, but
preach on. I love hearing this. Preach.
In the current generation that we're raising, track is not very popular because you can't out money the sport. If you throw the discus in college 145 and you win the conference. When I was in college, I threw 190. I can say, yeah, I threw 45 feet farther than you. It was you might be throwing literally the exact same discus I threw a Hollywood Star. And so a lot of people don't like it. I mean, the bar is set high in track and field. I'm not beating, and it's like the Olympic lifts, We joke sometimes about how many state records I have. Well, they kept changing weight classes in weightlifting through my career. So a lot of us have, Vasily and I and Dave Turner, probably all of us have 30 or 40 state records. Now, that might be an exaggeration, but not by much, because they kept changing weight classes. So we would break the state records, and then 2 years later they changed weight classes. But, if you snatch 150 kilos, you're strong. You clean and jerk 180 plus, you're strong. No one's going to disagree with you on that. Yeah.
Dan, a few years ago I read it was like an e-book called Get Up, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed reading the history of when you were being coached with Dick Nortmeyer, and kind of you really went into depth about the Olympic lifting background that you were just speaking of. Were you able to use that, or how do I want to say it? Was that be part of why you were successful at throwing?
Oh, yes, absolutely. When I graduated from high school, 162 pounds, I meet Dick, and I put on 40 pounds in 4 months because, man, it was all my traps and quads, and my butt. And the mistake I made is I was a good bencher when I met Dick, and then didn't bench press for 3.5, 4 years. In hindsight, I should have kept benching, but the truth is, so you can throw really far with just the snatch and clean and jerk. In fact, I'm not even sure you even need the jerk, the snatch and the clean. Now, that's what I did my senior year, and that was my big breakout year. Was I just snatched and cleaned? I was so sick of weightlifting my senior year. It's funny because I'd been training hard for 7.5 years, and one day I just woke up, just kind of tired. It's funny to say, I was just tired of lifting weights, So my senior year, I never back squatted over 385, but I did it, real easy and real fast. And I don't think I snatched over 265. I don't think I cleaned over 365. But I just decided to get in there, get it done, and go home. Well, my body loved it. So I guess the moral of the story is if you train really hard for 7 years, you can take a little time off. There's a weird story for you.
And to keep benching. Thank you for giving the bench press some love. Why would you say that you shouldn't have stopped? You can transfer, or the bench press would aid, I guess, in throwing.
But it comes down to this in everything. So as a thrower, you need to have, or any athlete, you need to have a quality squat movement. You probably need to have some load on that squat. Okay. You need a good bench. You need to do it correctly, and you need to have a good number. But the mistake we all make is enough is enough. What happens with most people is, well, if a 500-pound squat has got me here, well, then a 700 squat is going to get me there, and it doesn't work. Once you hit that threshold where enough is enough, and here's the funny thing, when people read my work, they miss this point. Once you clean over 350, the clean might not help anymore. But what people miss is you got to clean that adjective 350 first. Okay? You can't just show up and go, well, Dan John says strength isn't important. No. You got to clean 335, then talk to me about the value of 400. I don't want to hear about. So my point has always been so clear. It's like people think I'm anti-big lift, and it's like, well, you're some zit-faced high school boy in Des Moines, and you're critiquing my work. You shut up. Your 115-pound back squat isn't like a 605-pound back squat. Trust me, when you squat over 6, things start to break on your body. It's the weirdest feeling in the world. And of course, I'm gear-free, but you can't squat those huge loads and then walk out on the track and feel soft and springy and pliable. So enough is enough. So my problem with the bench press is I kept thinking when I was young, as I kept increasing my bench, I'd throw farther and farther and farther. You know what? It was true. I did. But then I discovered once I could just bench as easy as I could, right around 400. So get to 400 the fastest, quickest way I could. I didn't need anything past 4.
Yeah, it's interesting that you make that point because we try to reiterate to athletes all the time that what we do in the weight room are we provide tools to make you successful in whatever your sport or your discipline is. Unless you are your sport itself is powerlifting or is Olympic lifting, then, perhaps there comes a point in time where, if it's negatively inhibiting your ability to go out and practice, then you've reached the point of diminishing returns, right? And I think that's kind of the point you're trying to drive home.
No, I mean,
that's, in fact, that would be the great insight of my career. We say looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. And you'll find a lot of kids fantastic in the weight room, but who can't play on the field. And you'll see it all the time in high schools. You'll get that football player who comes out like his senior year to throw, and he throws 32, 35 feet in a shot, and he's twice as strong as a sophomore boy throwing 46. Well, the problem is the strong boy is – I'll tell you this. I always loved it when I did Highland Games, and some guy who was a bodybuilder showed up and asked me what my bench press was, because I always told him the same thing. 225, but I did it for 3, because this guy instantly thought he was going to beat me because his bench press was better than that. Well, I knew that this guy doesn't have a prayer. Looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane.
Yeah.
Sounds like
yeah, that's the same observation I made early in my NFL career. I mean, I came in and was pretty strong, and after I think my second year, I decided, they wanted me to get bigger, and I was like, you know what, I'd already benched 500 pounds, and if I can get stronger, and I just push the lifts, and I realized that you only have so much training time, and if you divide and really push all your training time towards getting stronger on that top end, I never really saw the difference between, about a 450-pound bench and a 550-pound bench. But the amount of time that it took me to get up to that 550 took away a lot of the flexibility, the movement, and a lot of the key factors that I needed to develop as an athlete. And that first year, I kind of fucked it up a little bit. And then as I kind of trimmed it back, all of a sudden I kind of created matrix in my head that hey, you know what, this is how strong I need to be. And then my whole off season was spent getting back. And once I hit that point, it was about hey, okay, I'm good, everything's balanced, and I had a whole bunch of different training matrix. It was right around about a 450 bench. I think it was right around a 600-pound squat, and I think I pulled a set of 8 for 5 or with 585 on the RDL, and if I could do 10 pull-ups with 90 pounds between my waist, and I had all these kind of little measures that I knew that if I could hit all these, I was ready to go, and it just becomes this this idea hey, this is what I need to do. And I mean, dude, I saw the same thing. You see this guy come in and, looks like $1 million, comes in, benching the world, and you go out there and just hit the dude and you fall like a bunch of pillows. So it was never the dude that I was ever worried about that looked like the bodybuilder. It was always the weird, awkward dude that was kind of bow-legged, kind of wide hip, big butt, big legs, kind of skinny, kind of gangly upper body. You're like, holy shit, this guy is kind of a freak. And those guys usually were some of the most athletic, just kind of awkward, strangely fast dudes. So it was those are the guys I always was worried about.
Dan, when I watched I watched your interview with Mark Ripito, and I thought that you made an interesting point when you were talking about how there comes a time when individuals I just gotta outwork this person. I don't have these great genetics. I gotta work 24/7, work. And then eventually it's you'll get to this point in your career where you don't really need to do that anymore, but it's hard to get out of that mentality.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about once you were able to squat 600 pounds or clean 350, you've reached that point. You don't really need to pursue higher numbers, but that personality that a person has to constantly outwork, it almost seems like it would start to get you into some dangerous waters.
Yeah, I like 2-day week programs a lot. I think they have great value, but what most people misunderstand is that you come into a 2-day week program when you're to the point that that's all you need. So following up your point, and the people who usually can't handle it are the people who have always been trying to find the edge on their competition. Looking for the next wave, we're looking for the edge, whatever cliche works for you. And what happens in a situation like me, undersized and all that, is that I would outwork my thought process was this: I would outthink and outwork you, and I'm going to stay one wave ahead of you. And it got to the point where I didn't need to do that anymore. And when I was able to slide down. Now, when I say able, why was I able? Well, it's because I was a full-time high school teacher. I'd taken on a job as a full-time college teacher. I was coaching, had 2 daughters at home. I had a dog and a cat and a wife who travels a lot. All of a sudden, I had this opportunity. I'm doing that thing with the fingers doing quote marks. Okay? Fingers doing quote marks. This opportunity, I only had 2 days a week to train. And then my career kind of blossomed again. Now, you throw out all that stuff, I would have still been training 7 days a week, twice a day. And I'd probably crush myself even more than I did. So sometimes life will actually provide this opportunity to really improve your training. When people ask me all the time, Dan, should I get this degree or should I do that? I always tell them, well, 4 years from now, if you follow that, you'll have the degree. And in 4 years, if you don't, you won't have the degree. Well, but then they say, well, what about this, this, and this? Well, you can do both. You can do many things. And it is an interesting thing that sometimes, and you'll notice if someone has the courage as an athlete to stick around for mastery. I guess I always use that in my books and writing up, and that's funny because I'm not sure the great question, Joseph Campbell, you keep using the word God, but what does that mean? When I say mastery, it's like I keep saying the word mastery, but what does that mean? When you pursue mastery, sometimes you find these bizarre periods of 5 to 6, 7 years where it seems like nothing is happening in your career, and then out of nowhere, you suddenly get better again. Because very often, that's the first time in your career you stop forcing it. We have on the phone here, we have a young lady. Well, if I decided to force us into a relationship, call you up constantly, hey, what were you doing last night at 3 a.m.? I came by your house. I noticed that there was a light on. What were you doing? Pretty quickly, this relationship would stagger and die, I think. And I see it the same way as an athlete. You can't constantly be stalking your achievements. You got to sometimes, let that baby fly a little bit, relax, ease up. The image I always use for both lifting, throwing, and life is a bow and arrow. You pull it, but to really make things happen, you've got to let it go. And I think what happens sometimes is when you get really busy, you finally have the courage to let things go.
I think that definitely makes a lot of sense, and I think it's hard for people to conceptualize that, like what you mean about kind of letting it go and letting the learning happen organically. But there's a lot to that. I mean, we get contacted all the time by people who are very earnest and have they're looking for as much knowledge as possible, or people who we work with or at seminars who want more and more, but ultimately. I'm always curious as to how much they're actually digesting and how much not only are they able to understand and to sort of put into practice, but like truly as a coach, like are they able to implement that and create like an environment where it can exist without it being so contrived in their training or their coaching or whatever. And I don't know if that makes sense to you, but like where it's sort of like you've incorporated the tools as you see fit. You're not just taking a cookie cutter thing and saying, all right, I've now done this, so now I can put that on my resume for saying I've done X or whatever.
Kind of even simplify it more. Okay, I've basically been retired for 5 years now. I'm 57, and I made this vast fortune by the most lucrative way you can do it, being a high school religion teacher for a Catholic school in Utah. All of you know the royal road to riches, but in my 20s, I saved 10% of my income. Now, this is an analogy, so we just lost half of our audience, but
75% of our audience.
Yeah. So my point is that how many of you were told in high school to save 10% of your income? No. I mean, isn't that economics 101, personal finance 101? Well, I did it. And when I look back over my athletic career and any athlete I've worked with today, basically what I look at as I say, what I'm telling them is buy low, sell high, save 10% of your income. I'm telling drink water. I mean, I'm telling them things that are so fundamentally, inherently simple that it almost bothers you But really, what makes up a career is linking all that stuff stepwise, and then one day, miraculously, the discus goes far. You all your dreams come true, and you marry the prince or whatever your goal is. And I think it's always been that you must master the fundamentals, the basics, and then have the courage to allow those to slowly swell over time. And the thing is, how fast that swells, a lot of it. Now, I always use the two G's, genetics and geography. I grew up in a track and field family. I grew up in a time where the discus was probably the most popular event at track meets. My genetics might not have supported my goal of being a thrower, but my geography did. If you were Usain Bolt and you grew up in West Texas, you'd be a wide receiver who the coach hated because you weren't very tough. You grow up where the national sport is sprinting, you're the world record holder. So a lot of times those two things bounce off each other. And my thought always is that my job as a coach and as an athlete is to fertilize both of those, get you into a geographic place that supports your goal set. I got to tell you, that might not be true anymore, but when I was young, if you want to be a bodybuilder and you didn't live in a certain part of Southern California, you were too stupid to be a bodybuilder because that's where it was. And if you decide to be in that, Mr. Greater Utah is your goal, you'll look fine, but you're never going to break through to the top here. You've got to make the voyage down there. Well, genetics and geography blend each other. So my job as a coach is to fertilize your genetics and then get you in the right spot, put you around some good soil, if you will. Okay? And that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that you make a point on is I've never heard anyone say that anyone was too stupid to be a bodybuilder, but there's a lot of bodybuilders that now appreciate that.
Well,
no, but that makes sense though. If you want to be, the best.
Like I've met some pretty unintelligent bodybuilders.
But point well made.
Know how to make it happen.
Yeah, you have to sort of make the changes.
It's just like when I told my dad I wanted to lift weights, and the only response he gave me was, "Why do you want to do that? You have to be a moron to count. What was it?
Count the
10 over and over again." Is what he said to me. So, well.
Yeah, and if you want to be, there was a time where if you want to be the best powerlifter in the United States, you might want to move to Ohio. I think that, or near where Marty Gallagher was, or if you want to be the greatest Olympic lifter in U.S. history, probably a good idea not to be from the U.S.
Yeah, that's true.
At the same time, I could have been on the Irish. My family's Irish. I can claim Irish citizenship. I could have made the Irish national team lots and lots of times. So you can also shortchange this idea too, and you can also make it work for you. But genetics and geography and letting things grow themselves is sometimes missed, I think.
So Dan, I'm curious as to what just hearing a little bit more about your background and kind of getting to know you through the podcast. I'm curious to know what your temperament is like in training situations. How would you describe yourself both in your own training or when you're kind of training other athletes in the weight room or whether it's on field or what have you?
Well, first off, I'm a classic check mark, okay? I have a horrible temper. My daughters can fill you in on one or two times people have messed with them. It doesn't go well for the person who messes with them. So as a coach, I try to be very calm, very reasonable, very seasoned, very smart. When I train, now one thing, I am competitive. Today I put up one of my friends did a little feat, so I decided to double him, and I put that up today. I do have a problem with my competitive streak is toxic to my health. So I have had to get smarter. Well, I haven't. That's not true. I just lied. I apologize. So as a coach, one of the things it takes a while for my athletes to learn is I don't always feel like I have to instantly have the best answer in the world. I think one of the three keys to being a coach is savoir-faire, and that is the ability to kind of react quickly to change. to be able to go from this to this. And one of the things I warn my athletes is my savoir-faire, my ability to react and change things isn't as quick. It might take, I prefer taking 3 weeks or even longer if it has to on a technical improvement, say in the discus throw, than to just throw a bunch of mishmash at you each and every day. In an hour or so, I'll be out coaching my thrower, and it's taken me the better part of a month to figure out what was wrong with his discus throwing technique, because I knew I had to come to the root of the problem. So I think as I age, the more I've decided that let's get to the, okay, there's cause and effect. I think your job, my job as a coach, is to, I'm waving my hand like there's smoke in front of me. My job is to wave away all the smoke and to find the fire. I need to find the cause of a problem. Not, I mean, telling an athlete, oh, you threw that out of bounds. Yeah, coach, I know that. So does all 10,000 people here. We all know that. What was the cause of that going out of bounds? Oh, you picked up your right foot too late. Or you picked up your right foot late and then you let it act like an anchor. Instead of picking up the knee, you picked up the heel. So it took me but Chandler's been picking up his heel rather than picking up his knee. Well, once I realized that the other day, I wouldn't say I started to cry, but it was so frustrating because I've known that with other athletes in a while. It just took me a while to come back. Here's the nice thing. What I can do now with Chandler, we've already worked on it, is now I have the cause of his problem, so we can focus throw after throw after throw on the corrective, not just I'll tell them all the effects. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious that I believe I know it's hard with the news, I believe the Seahawks just lost the Super Bowl. And what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to go to that one play. But I argue if you watch Tom Brady's last 2 drives, not to take the knee, but the 2 before, where he scored 2 touchdowns and he went like 15 for 17. To me, that's the cause of the win. Now, everybody in the world sees that one play, but so for me, that's what I'm trying to do with my career, is find the causes of things, not just what you see on the scoreboard, not just what you see in the newspaper, but what really happened.
How did you use the weight room to help kind of bridge the gap between like weight room strength and performance on the field or in a particular event?
Yeah, this is this brings into 2 things, and I talk about these a lot. The first is standards. I think one of the things you have to do as a coach is have a standard, and like my friend Josh Hillis has one for females and body fat. He says an interesting thing is that if a woman can squat 135 for 5 and 3 pull-ups, almost universally she has her body comp goals in line. And when he said that, it was like one of those things that kind of took me aback. It was like, wow, because it was such a simple standard. And so, like, for example, we know for an elite thrower, you need a 400-pound bench, 250 snatch, 300 clean, 450 back squat, deep back squat. Well, I had standards for high school football. And one of the things that began to happen is once you start to have a minimum standard, this is what a varsity football player should probably do. This is what a female fat loss client should be looking at. I'm scratching my chin as I do this. As I scratch my chin here, you begin to see certain patterns emerge. Like a high school boy tends to throw the discus well and the shot put well after they clean about 200 pounds. When they front squat, about 200 pounds. The number I came up with, 205. Once they start cleaning 205 and front squatting 205, all of a sudden the weight room translates to the ring. And then the other thing that I started to notice is that when a kid had gaps in the weight room, the most common gap is a deep squat and doing any kind of loaded carry like farmer walks. But when they had that kind of gap, just by having to do farmer walks, seemed to translate into the ring and in the football field and the wrestling mat better than, say, adding 50 pounds to bench press. So one of the things, and I hope all of you would learn from my time in the weight room on this, is that when you start to notice certain things happen over and over again, write them down, slap them up on the wall so that information stays a while. This local high school, just came up with a standard for varsity football. They want their varsity football players to clean 1.5% of their body weight. 150% of their body weight. And when my daughter told me, I laughed out loud, and how much can I swear on this?
Or as much as you want.
That was the stupidest fucking thing I ever heard in my life. A high school boy who weighs 200 pounds is expected to clean 300? High school. Well, I cleaned 300, and I cleaned 303 for the first time 9 months after getting with Dick Nuttmeyer. So I was on my way to my sophomore year of college, and I weighed 204. Guys, I could throw the college discus a long ways, and I could barely make their standard. I mean, where do these guys come? Where do they pull this out of? So you have to be very careful when you come to your standards, because they're rubbish. What happens if you have that 260-pound kid who's going to probably maybe play Division I? 260. Do the math. You're going to have, okay, am I right? 260 plus 130. What is that?
390.
Yeah, is 390 a good clean for a high school boy?
Pretty good.
Fucking unbelievable.
Good. I mean, if you had that boy cleaning 390, you think, how do you think he would do on Friday night against that 150-pound kid across from him? Well, he better destroy him.
Yeah.
I mean, he better throw him. I mean, it better be like one of those, Lord of the Ring things when that animal starts throwing goes through and starts throwing the people or elves or whatever the hell it is.
You're talking about the works? Like the work?
Yeah.
So you have to be careful. It has to be, you can't just hire some jackass to be your strength coach.
Now, was this a standard that they were putting out, like this is what everybody should be, or this is like the gold standard? Because I remember
it's like a benchmark.
When I was in high school, our gold standard was a 500-pound deadlift, 400-pound squat, 300-pound bench, and a 250-pound clean. Okay. You basically had to add up those numbers, and that, you can meet the board for all those, but then I remember the total, whatever it is, gets you to what we call our, Sea King or Panther Club or whatever what it was.
USC
clean was the tough part.
USC football had the standard for years of 300 clean, 400 bench, and 500 squat, and their old coach used to argue that if you don't need more than that. And it's funny because your school's basically at the USC standard, but which is all fine. But I guess what my point is that you have to have, if you had a whole team of kids who could all, and it's not going to happen, but clean 150%, and you don't win every game, you suck. You flat out suck as a staff. You are so bad you should all be fired. Because it ain't the strength coach's fault. You have a national Olympic lifting team in your weight room. And here's the other problem, as many of you will find out over time, to go from, my standard for a high school boy, 205 front squat, 205 clean. Those are the kid can play varsity. But to get that kid from 205 to 255, could certainly happen. But there might be a cost to benefit that you might be missing.
Yeah.
There might be a cost in all that increase that, I'm not saying injuries. I'm just saying nervous system and time and effort that might be better spent. I've always thought that if you got a kid who can run the high school high hurdles and clean 205 and front squat 205, he's fine. Don't worry about him. He can play.
At University of Washington in the 90s, they set their standard at 500 pounds for offensive lineman squatting. So NSCA published they published all the D1 university numbers, and University of Washington was leading 500-pound back squatters. What they didn't list was the number of back surgeries that they were submitting for these kids.
Well, if you guys know who the big stud was at the University of Washington about that time, Dan would probably know, was a guy named Steve Ettman. You guys remember who Steve Ettman was?
Sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, these guys are probably too young, but I had the opportunity to meet Steve Ettman, and he was probably one of the most physically impressive human beings I've ever seen. Played nose tackle for the University of Washington. Was also about 310 pounds, and there was a video of him doing standing backflips.
Yeah.
Just a freak of nature. But Eric Cohn, who was my strength coach at Cal, was actually the assistant at the University of Washington, and then when Keith Gilbertson came to Cal, he was our guy. So we would, and I'd met Steve Ettman there and used to hear the folklore of University of Washington. So it was definitely a hotbed for some human performance.
Real quick, my old friend John Price, he was a thrower for Washington in the 60s. And the only strength coach help they got was from the swim coach. And the swim coach told him the key in the weight room is you are only as strong as your weakest link. And I tell you, it's funny because John, that was his mantra. And it's funny because 1960s thrower, so John's got to be close to 70 now, or if not over 70. And yet, man, what a great summary of what our job as a strength coach is. You're only as strong as your weakest link, and he got that from the swim coach. Because, back then, if you lifted weights, it did two things to you. One, it made you muscle bound, and two, it turned you into a homosexual, which I actually still heard when I first started lifting weights. Sadly, I still touch my toes, and I can't. Agree on the other point is not even worth the dignity of discussion.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I definitely know where that's coming from a swim perspective. As on the field, you can overcome a lot of weaknesses, but you got the water fighting back at you. You have to be perfect in everything.
Yeah. Well, see, and I would argue too as a thrower. I always use the prism. I apologize, but as a thrower, after your 10,000th throw this year, what's going to fall off is what you overlooked. And I think you can't, in a collision sport or a collision occupation, you could just have bad luck. So I'm always worried because, I call it quadrant 2 in my system, but quadrant 2 tends to dominate all the discussions. That's the Navy SEALs and the NFL. And that's all great and glorious and wonderful, aren't we? Fabulous, and God bless all of us. But really, that stuff doesn't translate to like swimming or track and field. I don't need to build up any armor as a thrower. I don't need agility. Whenever I find out that a high school track program is doing agility, folks, they don't throw shit at you. You throw shit at them. You don't have to duck. God. So you really don't need agility. You don't, as a discus thrower, you don't need any conditioning. You don't need any at all. You need enough flexibility to, get everything in the right place. But if you want to be in a football player, you better have those other skills. So I think sometimes what happens is we've allowed, or it's funny how we, in this industry, football pushed back on strength training for a long time. Not as long as boxing, not as long as baseball. And track and field adopted it. So a while ago, we had a lot of strength coaches who were track and field guys. And then, if you might remember, the bodybuilder and the powerlifter guys showed up. And God bless them both. They're all fine people, I'm sure. But what happens is, we got this idea that, if you can't squat 700, you're worthless. You better work your arms. And it's kind of nice to see the industry starting to spin back again to that more traditional thing is the strength coach supports what's happening out in the field. We're not a sport in ourselves. That was a long point, wasn't it?
No, it makes sense. There was a huge change in like pro football, and really it really started in the 70s where I always remember hearing the story that there was like a big powerlifting meet in like the university or in Pittsburgh somewhere, and there a bunch of NFL players came, and I guess all the powerlifters and the NFL players got together, and next thing you know, a lot of the training methods and whatever else they knew, they kind of exchanged stories, and there was that whole mentality kind of really changed. Because before, in the 60s and 70s, like there was kind of an attitude in the NFL that you shouldn't lift weights, that'll make you a worse player, that like you said, it'll become muscle bound and have other problems with it. And there was this kind of big deal, and then all of a sudden there's been kind of a shift. But at the end of the day, it's like all these numbers are great. Everybody loves to use them. I mean, that's what the combine's all based on. But you still have to pass the field test, which is like, let's go turn on the film. I remember going to the combine and putting up these great numbers and jump and do all these things. But at the end of the day, I had to sit down with every coach and watch your game film and explain exactly what you did on every play. So, I mean, it was almost like all of this training and all of the different combine checks were almost like check marks. Like, okay, good. He's exactly the person we knew who he was. He can run, he can jump, he can lift, he can do all these things. But at the end of the day, if you can't play dead, you're not going to get the job. So I think people love to put so much value in it because it's quantifiable. Well, if he can bench 400 pounds, he's got to be better if he can bench 450. When they realize at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is can you get it done on the field that day. I mean, I never walked out on the field and had a guy tell me how much he benched. I never saw it tattooed on his body. I never saw it on his jersey. So I just knew that some guys were strong and some guys weren't.
Yeah, I also find it interesting when they check out numbers. Say a guy gets freaking as many reps as Javon Curse, then he's going to be compared to Javon Curse, even though they're a decade apart and two different athletes.
Well, the NFL is really big on like history and trying to like refine that guy. I remember Derek Thomas, God rest his soul, who was a great pass rusher for the Kansas City Chiefs. We went to training camp every year up in River Falls, Wisconsin, and Derek Thomas had about 8 kids with about 8 different women, all in the Minneapolis, River Falls, Wisconsin area. And I remember the scouts all telling me that they were all going to start scouting that area, all hoping to find the next Derek Thomas.
Oh, God.
I swear to God. I mean, I heard that story, and like, there's this, the NFL is so big on like, oh, that guy reminds me of this guy, because like I said, it's quantifiable. Oh, he's this, and they use these taglines like hard hat, lunch pail, athlete, plays well in a phone booth. I mean, all these little key terms, because it allows them to quantify and kind of pigeonhole people into certain little places, and it's just an easy way to describe it. Kind of like we always joke at Ocean's 11. You remember, he's like, "Oh, we're going to need Ella Fitzgerald, we're going to need this," and you can kind of label people for the job based on these like descriptions. And so they're like, "Oh, I'm going to need a Tony Baselli. I'm going to need a Derek Thomas. I'm going to need a this guy," and it just kind of fits all together, and it's just an easy way. And I'm sure, if you were to ask Dan, if you were to put together his all-star team, he could do the same thing. So it's just an easy way to do it. And I remember as a young player coming in, they're like, "Oh, you remind me of so-and-so." So what's the first thing I do? I go look that dude up. And then you're watching, you're like, "God, that guy actually sucks. That's not good."
That's not idea.
You're like, "You remind me of this guy." You're like, "That guy wasn't very good. Shit, I better change that."
Like a group instructor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good.
Oh, man.
So, Dan, what are you doing these days other than just coaching kids, saving lives, changing lives?
Writing.
And
in fact, it's funny. I'm editing my next book. It's called Can You Go? It's a system of assessments I use. But in the mornings, a couple days a week, I have my throwers come over here. We Olympic lift, and at 9:30, I have an intentional community that anybody in the world who shows up trains with me. Today we had a really good workout. It was a lot harder than I thought it was, but it was a good workout. And then
Fran? Was it Fran? Was it 95-pound barbell thrusters?
No, it was okay, I'll bore you with it. Okay, so you did a set of TRXTs followed by a set of double kettlebell presses. We had the double 20s, double 24s, double 28s, double 36s, and then 25 swings after that. And we just kind of tried to do as many loops as we could. The idea was to do 10, and so I did. I got 25, 250 swings in, and then with the double 36s, and it's on film, it's on my Facebook today. It's actually a set of 10 with 2 misses, but we'll count it as 12. I pressed the double 36s for 12, which is good, for 57. And then most days, the afternoon, I take care of chores and watch my grandkids sometimes. And then I go off and I coach the throwers. But really, a lot of my life right now is traveling on the weekends and selling books and trying. I'm really trying to give back to both track and field and weightlifting the best way I can.
Are you still traveling for RKC? Still working with those guys?
Well, the number of kettlebell events I do a year with Strong First or whoever is very few now, and There's, it's just not like it was. Mostly I travel. Well, I do perform better, and then I do a lot of my own workshops. I have a new workshop this year called The Art of Coaching, and it's a 3-day workshop. It'll be lecturing on coaching, and it'll be on a lot of things, but it also includes assessment and then hands-on, and then how to coach in group settings, which seems to be a something that is lacking. A lot of people are kind of good one-on-one. You self-coach, like for those of people who coach yourself, you don't need any clarity at all. If you have one client, I always recommend coach your spouse because that'll teach you more about coaching than anything in the world. You need a hell of a lot of clarity. But if you coach 100 14-year-olds at once, you need absolute clarity. You can't call things different. So I have this thing called 6-point position. It always has to be 6-point position with 100 14-year-olds. I can't call it the Mountain Dew position tomorrow. It's always has to be the same. So that'll be a point. And I do workshops a lot. I'll go to Europe 12 times this year. My wife jokingly calls me David Hasselhoff because I'm big in Europe. I think it's funny, but no one else seems to. So a lot of travel, a lot of training. I'm trying to be it's nice. I think I'm to the place in my physical life. I had a total hip replacement a couple of years ago, and then I had a hernia fixed. And honestly, in the last couple months, it's like I feel like I used to feel again. I feel really good. I don't have all that. I call it cortisol, call it whatever you want, but that painful inflammation that comes with an injury. And so I'm back to training heavy and hard again. Not crazy, smart stuff, but I just feel good. And it's kind of nice. So, I have some plans for the future, and they're all pretty positive. I want to make, in fact, the guys coming today, my wife and I have made a couple of endowments at different schools, and now we're going to start up another one. I don't want to give you details, but what we're trying to do, a couple of things at the schools. Catholic education in Utah is hard to afford for the teaching staff. So that's something we're trying to address, and then we also want to do something kind of for all. I would like it in the future that if people had the same opportunities I had, and I worry that some of them aren't going to be there. We'll try to make a difference there.
That's great.
That's great. I mean,
it sounds like you've on that account as well outdone all of us and what we're doing with our free time. So that's another one.
We do Wade's Army. I mean, we started a 501c3 to fight pediatric cancer called Wade's Army, and it was in memory of a little boy named Wade DeBrune.
I high-fived a homeless person once.
So yeah,
over the weekend.
You know what? It's all about that kind of paying it forward. You got to do something to create a ripple. Dan, are you still in Salt Lake City area?
Well, I'm in Murray, beautiful Murray, Salt Lake. That's a dump.
We've been there.
Yeah, Murray.
We've been there for a seminar.
Yeah, I have a good friend, Dr. Craig Bueller, who's in Kaysville.
That's up north a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I gotta go visit him. So I'll next time I'm in the area, I'll definitely look you up.
Yeah, beautiful Murray. It's about 6 miles south of the city or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got a little cloud today, got a little snow on the mountain. It
sounds great.
It's been great. Blue skies, a lot of blue skies lately. Least amount of crap in the air I could ever remember for this time of year. So it's been nice, though we do need some snow. We need some snow.
Yeah, we need some rain bad.
Yeah.
Dan, before we get off strength and conditioning too much, I was curious as to what are some of your favorite tools to use in terms of athlete assessments, and does it vary from athlete to athlete as you get more sport specific with them? But are there some go-to things or resources or things that you've developed through your coaching experience that you like to lean on for that type of thing?
Well, okay, to be a total jerk, let me give you my 3-word assessment for athletes. Ready?
Ready.
Go? Because that's it. I mean, to me, that's how you assess. I mean, God bless you that it's raining, and God bless you that your greater tibulus is overreaching its can you go? So for me, that's it. But I have my own little set of assessments like for everybody, but I still like at the basic level, I sure like a standing long jump and a farmer walk test.
Mm-hmm.
Both watching you do a farmer walk test just tells me so much about what's going on in your gaps and your strength levels. There's no teaching involved. The first time you do a farmer walk, you're pretty close to having it mastered. Standing long jump, it'll give you some clues about what we need to think about. I'm FMS certified and I know all that, and I think it's some greatness, but I simply just assume that everybody has shoulder mobility and active straight leg problems. I just assume it because once we start training, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just going to. So we just stick it in. My guys are all Titleist golf. TPI, as we like to say. They're all TPI, And so sometimes I'll have like Mike do, even though the guy's not a golfer, we'll have him do the assessment because sometimes that they put people in that hinge position.
Sure.
And play around. I think that's actually a real eye opener. From there, for example, with my really fine thrower I have now, he had some ankle mobility issues, and to be honest with you, I wasn't. And I'm still, even as I say this sentence, I still don't care. But we thought long-term addressing the ankle mobility now where he's at, maybe that allows maybe that doesn't overload his knee near back or something like that down the line with the Olympic lifts or the squat. Sure. So we kind of did that as a prophylactic, if you will. Not used that a lot of use the word term prophylactic, but so sometimes. So, and then the truth is, sometimes it's just can you go, baby? That's here's your goal. Here's what I can do to help support that goal.
Yeah, I think the farmer carry thing is actually, I'm embarrassed to say that I never thought of using that as an assessment tool. There's so many other sexy things out there, but the farmer's carry, just add a little bit of load, and it's a movement that people do every day with groceries or whatever.
Can I give you my numbers? Let me give you numbers, okay? And
yes.
This is years of experience, so give yourself 10 years before you come up with a better idea, okay? Use a trap bar. You'll thank me for this.
Okay.
If they weigh 135 pounds or less, 135. From 136 to 185, 185. For high school, you'll need the second one also. From 186 to 205, you'll need 205. And then everybody over 205, have them use 225. That's right. Someone's going to raise their hand and say, I've got a boy who weighs 370. 225. Well, he weighs 370. And I know I heard you. I'm not stupid. 225. It'll just save you a lot of hassle down the road, a lot less math. And what we use at this gym, if you can't go 100 yards with it, then that indicates to us that's a work capacity check mark in my head. If you can't do 100 yards with that. See, you don't have to worry about the balance of farmer bars since it's a trap bar. Your grip strength is talking to each other, so it's not the same problem. If you can't do the 50 out and the 50 back, that just is an asterisk in my head that something's going on. And the minimum on the standing long jump is your height. If you can't standing long jump height, then that just tells me something. A year after total hip replacement, I could do that easily. I'm not bragging. That's not to one-up anybody. But
yeah, I don't think we're going to feel one-up by a height long jump. Now we're all going to have to go out and check it, though.
Now, here's the thing.
We all need hip replacements. We have to level the playing field with a hip replacement.
If you're an elite thrower, you need to, or say like a volleyball player, maybe it's the line in the sand is 9'6". So if you jump 6'6" and the standard is 9'6", I can then indicate to you your problem is those 3 feet. Now, honestly, God, you might be able to play on the national team by just and stay on the team just by getting that standing long jump back where it used to be before the X, the Y, or the Z. So we don't always have to go 9'6" or whatever that line. But as if our training 6 weeks later, you jumped 6'6", and 6 weeks later you're up to 7 feet 4 inches. Well, that indicates that our training is on the right path. If your farmer walk was 72 yards and now it's 103, so both your standing long jump and your farmer walk increased, I can kind of sit back and say, you know what, I feel pretty good about this. I feel like we're on the program that we have is a good program. Very few people assess programs. Everybody assesses the person, and that's I think that has it diminishes value. If I put you on a fat loss program, well, and you lose fat, well, great. But if your standing long jump comes back a foot, the program sucks. And no one ever talks about this. So no one ever talks. So to me, I circle explosion and work capacity as the two big, whatever word you want. Those are the two big items. Mm-hmm. And if I put you on a mass gaining program, and you put on 40 pounds in 6 weeks, and your standing long jump goes up, that was a hell of a program. Whatever you did, man, was awesome. Whatever you did was great, and I'm going to repeat whatever you did the rest of my career.
Yeah.
If you put on 40 pounds in 6 weeks and your standing long jump stayed the same, I'm comfortable with that. Yeah. And I'm also comfortable if it dropped off a few inches. If you're a football player, you're not going to get smaller as the game goes on. I'm not worried about that. So sometimes what it does is it tests the program. Standing long jump and the farmer walk are simple to teach. The drill is the skill on them. If you find your athletes cheating by sneaking off by themselves and practicing their standing long jump, I'm okay with that. Hey, coach, you mind if we do some extra farmer walks today? Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Said nobody ever.
So those are the two. That's the big thing for me right now. Those are the two big tools I'm using to assess not the athlete. Clear that out of your head. To assess the program I have you on.
Yeah. And why not vertical jumps?
Okay, so you vertical jump 26 1/4 inches. After 6 weeks, you vertical jump 26 1/2. How much is my visual error going to impact that improvement? There's not enough inches to play with.
Okay.
There's not enough centimeters to play with. You follow?
Yeah.
On the waistline, I always measure males' waistlines in centimeters, because if they go from 104 to 100 centimeters, that's progress. But if they go from 38 3/4 to 38 1/4, they won't notice it.
I got you.
So you got to give it 10 years, Luke.
So I just don't think you have enough. I don't know, dots. I don't know. There's not enough
data points.
Yeah, the spectrum is there's too big of chunks.
Yeah.
Too big. Yeah. So you increase a kid's vertical jump, a good athlete, by an inch. That's impressive as hell. A good athlete.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just an inch. It's almost user error will hide an inch improvement. And don't tell me about those magic things you can buy from the companies. We all know those things are great, and that's fine. But with the standing long jump, you go from 2 meters to 220. Yeah, we know you're better. You follow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And user error. I mean, if I screw up by 1/2 an inch on a standing long jump, or an inch, it's in the wash. But if I screw up by an inch on the vertical jump, it's very noticeable. We had a teacher, a vertical jump test when I was in 9th grade, and the other boys taught me how to put your foot on the wall as you jumped, and it increased it about 5 inches. And one of the teachers always caught it, and the other one didn't. So you always made sure that you go into the one teacher on the vertical jump. So, but I've yet to see someone cheat halfway through the standing long jump. And in fact, if you can find someone to figure out a way to cheat in the air on a standing long jump, video it, because I want to see what the hell they're doing.
I know just the guy.
Yeah.
Nate, the Clinic Austin. He'll find a way.
Yeah, halfway through, you take a stick and you put it in the ground. And push
like a little oar.
A little oar, yeah. So that's it. So that makes sense. So you'll notice, too, remember I said you're not allowed to comment on them until you've done 10 years?
Yeah, text correct me.
No, because that's the vertical jump. I did it for years, man. And then all of a sudden one day I realized this kid went from being a 181-foot discus thrower to 214. His vertical jump didn't go up at all because we could have screwed up when it was. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So user error, man. If you user error, get used to that.
Gotcha.
Are you still big on working with Pavel and the kettlebells and?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I have 20 kettlebells in my home gym, and but the thing is, if you use kettlebells correctly, like really here's what the kettlebell is good for. I think it's good for this: the goblet squat, the kettlebell swing, and I really like it for overhead pressing. I like it a lot for overhead pressing.
Just because of the position of it behind your forearm on the press?
Yeah, and I just think that the kettlebell swing, the way it is, it's superior to using dumbbells. Try dumbbells and then try kettlebells, and you'll go, okay, I get what you say. And I just like the way that the kettlebell press works, and it just, I mean, I'm 57, and I've had my issues. I don't have when I do kettlebells. But with the barbell, it's the deadlift and press family. With the TRX, it's the TY and I pulls. With the ab wheel, it's the ab wheel. With the prowler, it's the pushing the prowler. With the sled, it's pulling the sled. When you come to my gym, every piece of equipment has its job, and its job is to do its job. And I tell you one thing: if you just went into the gym every day and did what the best thing each piece of equipment could do for you, you'd have a pretty good workout.
Yeah.
It's when you try to, it's when you're trying to push the kettle, it's like when people tell me about dragging kettlebells, it's like, why? Why not get a wheelbarrow at Home Depot, hook a rope through it and just drag that thing around.
Yeah, it's great. I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, that's one thing I learned early on in training, and I had a really good mentor, but, he was talking to someone, asked him a question about, I don't know, riding their bicycle for exercise, and he said, but all I have is a mountain bike. He said, good, that's harder. I mean, what do you want from me, and whether it's making something more awkward, and that's one of the things also I enjoy actually training with Luke with, is because sometimes I'll see him doing something differently, and we're always kind of bouncing ideas off each other, and I'll notice his body position is different or the tempo is different, and I'm like, why? It's like, it's harder. And I'm like, he's like, getting fewer reps, but it's not like a dick swinging contest. It's like we're on a program where it's supposed to feel hard, and it's supposed to be, this lactic acid type training. And so I can definitely understand the awkwardness of kettlebells and the use and the implementation of those.
Yeah, and so you got to be careful. I think I see the equipment in my gym as tools, and then for example, I could probably write today a really good book with pen and paper, but I have terrible handwriting, so I have this computer that will fix like spelling errors and grammatical. So I could also write a good book probably with a crayon on a wall.
Yeah.
And I feel sometimes when I talk to people, it's like, dude, you're writing a book with a crayon on the wall here. Why? And I understand there's times for a client to do a kettlebell deadlift, but once you get to a certain point, doing a kettlebell deadlift, use the damn barbell.
Yeah.
Use the correct tool for the correct job.
Sure.
And now I also have great respect for kettlebell-only gyms. Like Paul has his in Burr Ridge. It's a Burr Ridge kettlebell. It's just kettlebells. And I got great respect for that. I think you could, and the thing is, I also like it when someone just puts a line in the sand and says, hey man, this is who we are, this is how we're going to train. I've been to Olympic lift only gyms, and the answer to all questions is snatch and clean and jerk. Fat loss clients, snatch and clean and jerk. You see Marty Gallagher, you're going to be on a bench press, deadlift, squat program. If it's body fat, he's going to put you on a 12-week kind of modulated linear periodization to get you where you want to be. If you don't want that, don't go see Marty.
Yeah.
And I've got great respect for those of us who are still, sort of psychopathic on things. But at the same time, a guy like me, I have a lot of tools in my gym. I mean, I have rings in the backyard. I have a climbing rope. We got a lot of gymnastics equipment in my gym, and people say, "What do you do with this piece of equipment?" And I'll show them the 1 or 2 things, 3 things we do. No one in my gym is getting ready for the Olympics in gymnastics, unless they find a place for, 57-year-old guys who weigh over 200 pounds who go so far, a gymnastics competition at the Olympics. Otherwise, we use the tool to do certain things.
You make a good point about the kettlebell only or the Olympic lifting only gyms, and it's like even if you don't necessarily get behind the philosophy or its use for something like, say, weight loss, what you can really respect is like the fact that they're passionate. It's obvious they chose this one thing and they're so crazy passionate about it. To not appreciate their enthusiasm, to not somehow be affected by that in some way, would be like just crazy. So I can understand that. I mean, there are definitely people who, Zumba is their entire life. Their entire life is Zumba. It will always be Zumba. And you're like, fuck, I hate everything about what you do, but I also appreciate it. No, I've never done it.
My fat loss program, and I've been telling people for the years, is join the high school track team and become a 400-meter runner.
Yeah.
It's like, I can prove in just a short few weeks. In fact, I always tell people it's the eat anything you want workout.
That's 350 meters too far, I think.
No,
eat anything you want at breakfast or lunch. God, go to McDonald's. Get all that salty fat.
Gross.
Because I'll find it all over the track the next day.
Yeah, that's true. Running is a great equalizer.
Well, 400 meters. And, when we train kids, it's like they always say, people come in and go, how did you get these boys they have? Look at those bodies. They're so chiseled. How can I do that? Well, you're going to just go over there and then run as fast as you can around the track one time, and then we'll rest a few minutes, and we'll do it again, and then we'll do it just one more time. I have a rule with my runners. It's called the 1,200-meter rule. We never go over 1,200 meters in a practice. And people say, why? And then I look at them like, it's obvious to me you've never done what I've just said.
Yeah.
Never done it. Well, but
I wish you could talk to my high school football coach.
Less is more.
Our favorite workout was 16 220s. So you would run a 220, walk a 220, run a 220.
And how many times in a game? Unless they changed the football field to
it was ridiculous, but that was our once a week workout. It started at 16 and ended at 16, and we did that for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was our conditioning, and that was terrible. It was 16 miles, 4 miles.
Carry over on the field of play.
Yeah, it's terrible.
You probably lost through the years, you probably lost a couple of guys who were real probably high-end players, because when you're constantly challenging the smart guy, someone's going to walk away. Someone who could, okay, enough.
Hey Dan, is there anything specific coming up? Any of your lectures or your seminars or your book that you want to tell our listeners about, or where they can go to find those resources?
No, not really. But I mean, I got stuff coming up all the time. But I got my blog at danjohn.net, and on Facebook I'm Daniel John. But I don't usually pimp my stuff. I don't.
Well, that's because you have so many people already following you.
Are you kidding me? He's like the most celebrated writer on our favorite site, T Nation.
It is. Yeah,
I tell you, that place is the Wild West.
Anything goes.
Actually I refer to it as Teabag Nation.
Hey there.
I will write an article on there. Someone will take offense to something I said, and it's like, holy, and it's usually a man. It's like, dude, I'm embarrassed you just wrote that.
I'm embarrassed.
Offense to that?
It's so great.
It's
I said one time, I don't think you're strong, and I put a number in there. He goes, well, I've been lifting 6 years, and I can't do that. It's like, yeah, and I was a 135-pound high school sophomore and could. My point being is maybe God doesn't want you to lift weights.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's coming from
you have to come to the realization that
that's
maybe
coming
God
from a theologist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not a bad person because when I say things like that.
No.
I just, that's the genetics and geography. We get back to that again. These guys.
The internet has bred incredibly sensitive people. Like, I'm always amazed at how sensitive people are.
It has not
internet.
bred them. It's merely brought them to have a voice. They've always existed.
Because normally in person you just belittle them and they would just like go
They
off in
would-
the corner. But,
Well,
that's
you
all.
see now you can't do that, John. You can't belittle people.
Oh, it's because they come back and shoot you?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So
exactly.
you're gonna shoot John?
Yeah.
No,
Callie, well, she's probably pretty good with a gun.
I'm
Maybe
fine.
watch out.
but we do like T-Nation. I mean, there's definitely
we don't.
entertainment.
We
there's,
do not like T-Nation.
There's entertainment there. Yeah.
But I tell you something, if you go back to 99, when they used to come out every Friday in 98, 99, I mean, it was a high, I mean, they popped up this is where I learned about Ian King and a bunch of other people. Some of the stuff has been really, T-Nation has really brought forth a lot of great things. Now, of course, since they come out, now it's daily, sometimes, I mean, there's certain authors that it's like, how can you come up with new stuff every 3 days?
Yeah.
And
Well, they went back to 99 and they just rewrite it.
it's
It's just recycling of ideas.
TC just asked me to talk about something I wrote in 1998. As a joke, I called it the 10 Commandments, and it's funny because when I reviewed them in 2015, I felt that the same things still stood. So it's kind of funny. So they do some things like that, which I appreciate. Sometimes I look at the article and I obviously know but it's like the fitness magazines. I mean, I know they're not written for me. I'm not stupid. I go in there and the macho posturing, I know I was that way when I was 14 and 15, but you get to a point where I really have moved on from that. My legacy is not going to be the fact that I once won a fight in a pizza parlor or something. I have much cooler stories than that I can't even share with you guys. But the stories are so cool.
It was actually a fight in the Burger King.
And it's like, you just wake up one day and you realize that, and I do. I do like the internet. I really have gotten a lot out of it. At the same time, it also allows the bullying of anonymous and things like that.
Well, just know the internet's a fad. It's going to go out of style, kind of like pockets and zippers. But I'm putting my money on it that the internet's going to be a fad and it's going to go out of style.
It is also interesting when you finally do meet some of these people finally in person, and it's like the first thing out of my mouth is, "I know you type a lot. Have you ever lifted?"
Oh, Jesus.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's we've run into, or I've run into that a few times. I think I taught a seminar and this lady was arguing with me the efficacy of one-arm dumbbell rows as a functional movement, and the lady was probably mid-30s. Her lifting experience was probably 2 months. And she literally was telling me, talking about her athletes and her coaching and all this stuff, and then wanted to argue with me about the efficacy of using a one-arm dumbbell row as a functional movement. And I was like, first of all, define functional movement. And she's like, well, it's not one-arm dumbbell rows. I'm like, well, let's go through definitions. Multi-jointed, yes. Does it have translation to something else? Yes. And I kind of went through this whole thing, and then and then finally I was like, how have you been doing this? Well, I was, this, and I've really been into lifting weights for, a shorter time. And I'm like, well, what's short? Like under a year, under 10 years? She's like, no, seriously for a couple months, but my head's always been in it. And I remember being like, I have to have a conversation with a lady. And I was like, I've been doing this, I'm 37, and I've been doing this since I was 14 years old religiously as a job, and actually used everything I did in my training to generate an income and support myself and play at a high level. And this is the conversation I'm having. And she thought that, and of course, she accused me of being arrogant. And I was like, I just think that, people, like everybody's so quick to jump out there and be a fucking expert. And the thing about experts is, there really aren't that many. That's why they're experts. Mm-hmm. And but what the internet's allowed people to do with a Google search and a few watching the videos, everybody's an expert. Like when I started Olympic lifting, nobody Olympic lifted. I mean, we did it in high school, went to college. I remember I had to order my Olympic lifting shoes, and they took like 4 to 6 weeks to get there. And now you turn on the internet, everybody's a fucking Olympic lifter. It's amazing. I'm like, it blows my mind. So.
Well, nothing wrong with that. My only soft spot in my heart for T Nation is because I had a T Nation account before I had a Facebook account, and so I thought that was social media.
They have used 3 of my pictures directly of me without permission.
Shouldn't be on the internet.
That they've taken off my site of me.
I wonder how many pictures there are of me floating around on T Nation. 0.
I know Packy's up there.
Oh, is she?
Packy
Well, that's
made it
because she's got a banging body.
Yeah. Well, when you put out 27 articles a day, you got to start swiping stuff left and right. They got probably people just searching the internet for things.
Dan, this is the point in the podcast where we go off the rails. So if there's anything more pertinent that you want to talk about, now's the time.
Well, anything else to add? Hey, this has been great. I have to go to practice here pretty soon.
Oh, okay. You are doing constructive things with your time. That's right.
No, not necessarily.
Not just fucking around on the internet.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and rap with us on.
Any last questions or anything you want me to?
Denny, was there anything?
Is it difficult being Catholic in Salt Lake City, Utah? Mormon area?
I mean, well, that's it. I mean,
you being Irish Catholic and me being Irish Catholic, I'm just wondering how it fits in with that. A nice Irish boy from South San Francisco living in the stronghold of the LDS.
It's you kind of after a while get used to. There's no nice way to say it.
Well, you know what? We're uncensored.
There are obviously a lot of quality people here. There's a bit of there is a problem of poor eyesight in my great state. It's interesting because many magazines have called Salt Lake City the most gay-friendly town in America, and yet most people, if you told that in Salt Lake City, would not even realize that we have a massive LGBT community here in Utah. They wouldn't even know because they don't see things. So, I actually think it's good for me in a way because it allows me to be able to go in and make a difference. My wife and I are very. We discovered years ago that there's a huge suicide rate among the children here, so we've been actively involved in not only donating but in sponsoring a whole bunch of different things to help curb that, because I never felt that suicide, I don't condemn, but at the same time I've always felt that is such a permanent sort of temporary problem. So we've been very active in there. So I feel like, if I hate to call it a call because that sounds so gracious, but it's been a lot of blessings and a lot of joy for me. I've enjoyed it very much, and I feel like I can make a difference here.
That's great.
My neighbors pretend I don't exist, but that's okay.
Well, that's great. Well, go ahead and get off to practice. Thank you so much again for joining us, Dan, and we hope to have you on soon.
Thanks, Dan.
Anytime you guys want. I thought this was really easy, and I really appreciate the time.
Oh,
Thanks a lot, Dan.
You bet. My best to all of you, okay?
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Dan.
A big thanks to Dan for imparting all of his wisdom and experience. If you want to learn more about Dan John, you can visit his website, danjohn.net, and, of course, read his articles on tnation.com. Next week, we will talk with Brent Brookbush of the Brookbush Institute of Human Movement Science Education. I may rid Brent a bit on the name, referring to it as the ilovemyself.com of physio sites, but rest assured, this guy knows the body. His website has been a great educational resource for coaches and athletes seeking a deeper understanding of human movement and mechanics. Stay tuned to episode 97 for our conversation. Until then, thanks for listening. Bye!